But first, I'm joined by Malachy Browne, news editor of Storyful, by Nabeel Rajab from the Bahrain Centre for Human Rights, and by human rights activist Tara O'Grady. And we're going to discuss the struggle for democracy in Bahrain, a struggle, Malachy, that we'll be discussing later, has quite a unique Irish dimension to it. But we're used to discussing the Arab Spring in terms of Egypt and in terms of how that uprising has developed in terms of Syria and Iraq and other parts of the Middle East. But can you maybe elucidate us what is going on in Bahrain at the moment that has attracted attention there?
Nabeel's visit really to highlight the ongoing human rights abuses that are happening in Bahrain. Bahrain was one of the Arab Spring countries, as we would know it here. There was the first pro-democracy demonstrations were on the 14th of February 2011 when there was a wave of political dissent across the Arab region, although there had been unrest prior to that, social unrest. But since then, it's kind of fallen off the media's radar. But every night there are running battles between security forces and police. Suppression of demonstrations continues. Opposition figures are imprisoned. Nabeel himself was released from jail in May after 2 years, arbitrarily detained simply for opposing government policy there.
We might actually be able to see some footage of some of the abuses that taken part in Bahrain. Like Ireland, quite a small country, but just maybe you can talk us through the footage that we're seeing now.
Yeah, this is, this really demonstrates what the security forces are doing over there. Utter disrespect for human rights, throwing stun grenades, violently suppressing peaceful demonstrations. As you can see here, just absolute disregard. In fact, they're contravening international human rights law through the use of tear gas and birdshot. The bullets have stopped. They used to fire live rounds at people in the early days of it, but now they fire tear gas canisters and very strong tear gas directly at people. You can see here tear gas canisters being fired into civilian areas. This footage here shows a child in the direct line of fire here. Can't be more than 2 or 3 years old. International law dictates that if you are to use tear gas, that it has to be shot at a 60-degree angle, and this is like direct hits. This person here who's struck actually died from their injuries, and it's at close range. So the opposition there and the demonstrations have been largely peaceful because of the security forces' handling of what's happened in the last couple of years. There is violence now in certain pockets. Sitra, which is just beside the capital, and security forces again violently suppressing that. And
Nabeel, your government or your opponents would describe you as the informal leader of the uprising, perhaps, and doing it all from a Twitter machine. It was your use of social media and galvanising support through social media that led to your imprisonment. Is that the case?
Well, we are in a country where media are not allowed to get in. Journalists are not allowed to get in. News are not allowed to go out. Journalists, photographers are behind bar. No human rights groups allowed to get into Bahrain. So the social media become the only tool, the only way that we can expose what's going on, the crimes, as you have seen here, which Malachy were working on it's through the social media. This is the only way we can...
You have a huge amount of followers for quite a small country. You've nearly 250,000, or...?
I think all in all, I have almost half of the Bahraini population and my follower. And that shows the influence of the social media, where the people don't trust the local media. They don't trust the newspaper, which is influenced or owned by the government. So our social media become the only source, the only independent, the only non-governmental place where you can get piece of information. So yes, we use that as much as we can, and we are the most the most active nation in the whole Arab region in the social media.
But you spent over 2 years. You spent over 2 years in prison.
Yeah, for tweeting and all that, for asking people to take part in a peaceful protest. In fact, what I have done, for your information, 2 days ago, and I made a poll in my Twitter and on my Instagram account. I said, who wants the Prime Minister to stay? Who wants the Prime Minister to go? So 99.9% of the people who voted asked the Prime Minister to leave. to go. And the Prime Minister commented yesterday, he said we're going to target all those people using Twitter and social media, which mean me. So I'm afraid also that I go back and again I'm going to return back
and
to
just to remind people, because it's a struggle for democracy. That's the purpose.
It is a struggle for democracy and justice. We are ruled by dictators. We're ruled by dictatorship, by a family who invaded the country 200 years ago, treated the people very bad, discriminated against the indigenous population. As you see, the police forces that you have seen just a minute ago, they were not from my country. They were brought from Pakistan. They were brought from Jordan to treat people as you have seen. People of Bahrain, because they are from a Shia background, they cannot be employed in the police forces.
And I just, Tara, sometimes we just become immune nearly to what's happening in certain parts of the Middle East. We're not aware of it. But there's a very unique dimension, an Irish dimension, to events in Bahrain, not least because of the role of the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland training medics. And some of those who were trained by the Royal College of Surgeons in Bahrain, the so-called felony medics, they were tried and convicted.
Absolutely. In fact, one of them remains in prison. His name is Dr. Ali Alekri. He worked here in Ireland for a number of years, and one of his children was born here in Ireland as an Irish citizen. He was released with the felony medics a couple of years ago. There was a demonstration in Dublin. Professor Damien McCormick, he taught the guys like Ghassan Daif and Bassam Daif when they were here in Ireland. And we had a demonstration that was a rolling solidarity fast with the doctors. Hunger striking is very important in Ireland, as we know, and incidentally, Mr. Abdulhadi Al-Khawaja went on hunger strike again on Monday. He had been on hunger strike for over 100 days, but they were force-feeding him, which really delegitimised his hunger strike, and he had to come off it. He was very close to death.
And events in Bahrain led to Professor Tom Collins, who was the head of the Royal College of Surgeons in Bahrain, stepping down or stepping aside on grounds of academic freedom. But what do you think the underlying problem for him was?
I know that Professor Tom Collins resigned because he felt that his efforts to influence the regime were completely thwarted. He realised that he was powerless to assist the crisis in the country, and that's why he resigned.
Has the Royal College of Surgeons yet secured accreditation in Ireland? Because obviously there was an Irish delegation, Parliament here were exercised certainly about the alleged abuses over there. Have they yet secured that?
David Andrews and Avril Power, Professor Damien McCormick and others went over with Marion Harkin, MEP, went over to Bahrain and did an investigative research for a couple of days there and met Nabeel. The RCSI has been consistently complicit and silent on what happened in Bahrain.
Well, they would say that as far as they're aware, that there were no abuses or tortures in their facilities.
Hospitals were used in Bahrain as a torture centre. They've been torturing victims. They've been torturing people, wounded people.
And an independent report bore that out, but that the Bahraini government themselves commissioned.
Many human rights groups documented, and I'm surprised to hear that the university said not. In fact, the university, which is run by the college itself today, it has discriminated against the Shia, and no Shia can work there based on their religious background. A majority of people cannot be employed in the hospital run by the college itself.
Malachy, would bodies like the Royal College of Surgeons that go over, they're involved in training there, is there a difficulty for them? Should they be taking a stand? What can they do? They're guests ostensibly in a foreign country.
Of course, they should be taking a stand, but they also have economic interests there, as do other Irish companies. In fact, Arienta, ESB, Irish engineering companies. I myself, in fact, contracted for an engineering company several years ago that worked in Bahrain, and their interests are purely economic. And the same is true of the UK and the US.
We said, but the human right has to be respected. You are allowed to do your business. We say to all European government, you do your business. We care for your interests as you do, but human right has to be respected. You cannot make business and make money when your money has a stain of our blood. This is what we're telling.
So coming to Europe, coming to the UK and Ireland, what if you were to say to people in Ireland tonight, what would you want the Irish government to do?
Well, we have common history, I would say. We were all oppressed. Irish people always took the stand with the oppressed nations. And we are oppressed nation. We had the same history. We share the same, a lot of things. We asked them, as they are doing now, people like Malachy, like in fact Tara, like human rights groups, Frontline here, and many organizations, doctors and all that, stood with us, and we do appreciate that. And that's why today I'm here, invited by Frontline, but at the same time to say thank you for the Irish population, and we want them to continue support our struggle for democracy and justice in our part of the world.
Well, thank you, Nabeel, for coming tonight. We'll be rejoined later by Malachy and Tara.